Happy Days is...
Have you ever wondered why the coolest man on American television chose a British motorcycle to define his rebel identity? What if the Fonz's Triumph TR5 from Happy Days was concealing production secrets so deeply buried that even the most devoted 1970s television historians never thought to investigate them? These are 20 weird facts about Fonzie's 1949 Triumph Trophy TR5 that will completely blow your mind. Number 20. The Triumph TR5 was 13 years old when the show began. Filming!
Happy Days is filmed...
When Happy Days entered production in 1973, the Triumph Trophy TR5 assigned to Henry Winkler's Fonzie character was already 13 years past its 1949 manufacture date. The production's transportation department had been tasked with sourcing a motorcycle that communicated authentic 1950s greaser culture while remaining mechanically reliable enough for weekly television production demands. The TR5's specific manufacture year was not initially a priority in the sourcing brief. The transportation coordinator identified the bike through a private seller in the Los Angeles area, whose asking price fell within the production's modest vehicle budget. Only after the purchase was completed did the art department confirm that the 1949 manufacture date was period correct for the show's setting. The fortunate alignment between budget availability and period accuracy was entirely coincidental rather than the result of deliberate research. Nobody in the production had specified the manufacture year before the bike was purchased. Number 19. Henry Winkler cannot ride a motorcycle and never could.
The Fonz, but did you know that he only rode the Fonzie motorcycle one time?
Wait?
The single most surprising secret surrounding Fonzie's Triumph TR5 is that the actor most associated with motorcycle cool in 1970s American television never learned to ride a motorcycle during the entire run of Happy Days. Henry Winkler's relationship with the Triumph TR5 was exclusively performative. He could sit on it convincingly, lean against it authoritatively, and interact with it physically in ways that communicated complete ownership of the machine. He could not operate it. The production solution was a combination of careful camera positioning, short push-assisted rolling sequences, and strategic editing that maintained the illusion of riding competence across 11 seasons, without Winkler ever genuinely operating the motorcycle under its own power. Winkler has acknowledged this openly in multiple interviews across his career, describing his relationship with the bike as the greatest acting challenge the role presented him with consistently across the show's entire run. On number 18, the Triumph was repainted annually, without anyone officially authorizing it.
Think it's nice, huh? First of all, bikes are not nice, they're cool. Second of all,
The Triumph TR5's distinctive black paint finish, so fundamental to Fonzie's visual identity that it became inseparable from the character, was not maintained through any officially sanctioned production maintenance program. The bike received annual repaints conducted by the transportation department's technician, using his own judgment about when the existing finish had deteriorated beyond acceptable camera quality. No producer formally authorized the repaints. No budget line item covered them. The technician absorbed the cost of materials personally for the first 2 seasons, before the transportation coordinator arranged an informal arrangement with the production's art department to cover the expense through a discretionary supplies budget that was never specifically earmarked for the purpose. The specific black formulation used for each repaint varied slightly depending on what was commercially available at the time, meaning the Triumph's black was technically a different shade in different seasons, without any viewer ever registering the variation.
Number 17. Triumph's British factory never knew their motorcycle was on American television. Throughout the entire original run of Happy Days from 1974 to 1984, Triumph Motorcycles factory in Meriden
England remained entirely unaware that one of their 1949 Triumph trophy machines had become the most famous motorcycle on American television. The production had sourced the bike privately without any manufacturer involvement, meaning no supply agreement, no licensing arrangement, and no communication channel existed between the production and Triumph. The manufacturer's American commercial operations during the 1970s were managing their own considerable difficulties, including the industrial disputes that would eventually lead to the Meriden factory's closure in 1983. Nobody at any level of Triumph's organization monitored American television programming for brand appearances. The discovery that their motorcycle had spent a decade defining cool for an entire generation of American viewers arrived at the manufacturer years after the fact, through second-hand industry communication rather than any direct connection to the production. Number 16. The bike was locked in a storage unit between seasons without climate control.
I just want to get it up and running, riding, and make it pretty. That's the first step.
During the production hiatus periods between Happy Days' annual seasons, the Triumph TR5 was stored in a standard commercial storage unit near the Paramount Studios lot that provided no climate control, temperature regulation, or humidity management. The bike sat through Southern California summers in an unventilated metal storage unit that regularly reached internal temperatures capable of damaging the rubber components, electrical systems, and paint finish of any motorcycle stored within it. The transportation technician responsible for the bike's welfare has subsequently described his anxiety about the storage conditions during hiatus periods as a constant background concern throughout his involvement with the production. Several components required replacement at the beginning of each new season, specifically because storage damage had rendered them unserviceable. The production never invested in appropriate storage facilities, despite the bike's growing cultural significance as the show's audience expanded across its first several seasons. Number 15, a stunt double motorcycle was built from completely different parts. The production's eventual recognition that the hero, Triumph TR5, needed a stunt equivalent led to the construction of a backup motorcycle that shared essentially nothing mechanical with the original bike beyond its visual appearance. The stunt unit was assembled by the Transportation Department's technician from a combination of components sourced from multiple donor motorcycles of approximately the correct period, none of which was a genuine Triumph TR5. The visual match was achieved through bodywork fabrication and paint rather than authentic components. The finished stunt unit looked sufficiently similar to the hero bike at standard television camera distances to pass without scrutiny, but would have been immediately identified as a different motorcycle by anyone examining it closely. The stunt unit absorbed the physical demands of sequences that the irreplaceable hero bike could not safely accommodate, protecting the original from damage while maintaining the visual continuity audiences expected. Number 14, the Smithsonian Institution requested the bike before the show had finished airing.
This is at 4, so we only have an hour, so I'm pretty much going to do a quick walk.
The Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History made a formal acquisition approach for Fonzie's Triumph TR5, while Happy Days was still in active production and the show had not yet broadcast its final episode. The approach, directed to Paramount Pictures through official institutional channels, argued that the motorcycle had already achieved sufficient cultural significance to warrant preservation in a national collection, regardless of whether the show had concluded. Paramount's initial response was a polite deferral rather than an outright refusal, citing the impracticality of transferring an active production asset to any external institution before the production had concluded. The Smithsonian renewed their approach following the show's conclusion. Paramount's eventual agreement to the transfer represented one of the more unusual acquisitions in the museum's collection history, involving a television prop whose cultural status had been established entirely through the performance of an actor who could not operate it. Number 13, the show's writers used the motorcycle to resolve continuity problems.
Happy Days is filmed
between-season Happy Days writing team developed an informal practice across the show's middle seasons of using Fonzie's Triumph TR5 as a narrative device for resolving continuity inconsistencies that had accumulated between seasons without requiring direct acknowledgement of the errors. When a character relationship, location detail, or established fact from a previous season contradicted a current season's narrative requirement, a scene involving Fonzie and the motorcycle could be constructed to redirect audience attention at the moment of potential contradiction without addressing the inconsistency directly. The technique relied on the bike's extraordinary audience appeal as a visual anchor that reliably drew viewer focus away from surrounding narrative details. Several writing staff members from the show's middle period have referenced this practice in retrospective interviews without identifying specific episodes where it was applied. The motorcycle had become not just a character prop, but a narrative management tool whose audience appeal the writers exploited pragmatically. Number 12. Paramount insured the motorcycle for a value that shocked the transportation department.
Or liability arising from the production or post-production process.
When Paramount Pictures' insurance department conducted a formal valuation of the Happy Days production assets for the policy covering the show's fourth season, the assessed insured value assigned to the Triumph TR5 was significantly higher than the transportation department's own estimate of the bike's replacement value. The insurance department had conducted their valuation based on an assessment of the motorcycle's cultural significance to the production rather than its market value as a 1949 Triumph. Their position was that replacing the specific bike, including the time cost of sourcing an appropriate alternative and preparing it to the established screen standard, represented a production disruption cost far exceeding the bike's market value. The transportation coordinator, who had purchased the bike for a figure he has described in subsequent interviews as embarrassingly modest, found the insured value figure disorienting enough to request a written confirmation that the valuation was correctly applied to the motorcycle rather than a different production asset. Number 11. The motorcycle inspired a generation of Triumph purchases, that the brand was unprepared for the cultural impact of Fonzie's Triumph TR5 on American motorcycle purchasing behavior across the 1970s generated a demand pattern for vintage Triumph motorcycles that the used motorcycle market was entirely unprepared to accommodate. Viewers who wanted to replicate Fonzie's aesthetic began actively seeking period Triumph motorcycles through dealers, private sales, and classified advertisements in volumes that measurably affected pricing for the specific models most closely associated with the show's visual references. Triumph dealers handling used inventory reported a sustained increase in inquiries, specifically referencing the television show across the mid to late 1970s. The phenomenon was complicated by the Meriden factory's contemporary difficulties, meaning that a show was simultaneously driving demand for vintage Triumph products, while the manufacturer producing current Triumph motorcycles was struggling toward insolvency. The demand Fonzie created benefited private sellers of vintage machines, rather than the manufacturer whose heritage the show was inadvertently promoting. Number 10. The Triumph TR5 appeared in an episode that was banned from syndication.
Hi, Lois.
Happy Days produced one episode during its sixth season that was subsequently removed from syndication packages sold to regional American broadcasters, and the Triumph TR5's role in the episode was cited as a contributing factor in the removal decision. The episode in question contained a sequence involving the motorcycle that the syndication standards review considered inappropriate for the afternoon broadcast slots regional stations typically assigned to Happy Days reruns. The specific content concern was never formally documented in any publicly available CBS or Paramount communication. Former production staff members have described the sequence as involving the motorcycle in a context that the original network broadcast standards of prime time had permitted, but that afternoon, syndication guidelines could not accommodate. The episode was quietly withdrawn rather than edited, meaning the Triumph TR5's involvement in the sequence was preserved intact in the original broadcast version, while disappearing entirely from the reruns most viewers encountered. Number 9. The transportation technician who maintained the bike refused a significant buyout offer.
I thought you were a sensitive person. This is not just a...
The transportation department technician responsible for maintaining Fonzie's Triumph TR5 throughout the majority of Happy Days production run received a private acquisition offer for the motorcycle from a collector during the show's 7th season that represented a figure considerably exceeding the bike's assessed production value at the time. The offer was not directed through Paramount's official channels. It was made directly to the technician through a mutual contact in the Los Angeles motorcycle community, who had apparently misunderstood the technician's relationship with the bike as one of personal ownership rather than professional custodianship. The technician declined the offer and reported the approach to the production's transportation coordinator, who in turn reported it to the studio's security department. The incident prompted Paramount to issue clearer internal guidance about the distinction between production asset custodianship and personal ownership, following the revelation that the bike's growing cultural value was attracting unsolicited acquisition approaches from outside the production. Number 8. The bike appeared on a U.S. postage stamp proposal that was ultimately rejected.
Stamps are representing a really diverse...
During the United States Postal Service's 1980s popular culture commemorative stamp planning process, a formal proposal was submitted by an external design consultancy recommending a stamp featuring Fonzie's Triumph TR5 as part of a series celebrating iconic American television imagery. The proposal reached the Postal Service's Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee, which reviews all external stamp proposals before making recommendations to the Postmaster General. The committee rejected the proposal on grounds that the motorcycle represented a commercial product rather than a cultural achievement distinct from its brand identity. The rejection documentation noted that the Triumph TR5's manufacturer origin complicated the committee's standard assessment framework for distinguishing between cultural icons and commercial product promotion in commemorative philatelic design. Paramount Pictures was informed of the rejection through the design consultancy that had submitted the proposal. The committee's decision was never publicly announced. The Triumph TR5 therefore came within the formal review process of appearing on American postage without achieving it. Number 7. A replica TR5, built for personal appearances, was stolen and recovered. Twice Paramount Pictures commissioned the construction of a purpose-built Triumph TR5 replica specifically for personal appearance events, promotional activities, and fan conventions, protecting the irreplaceable hero bike from the handling risks associated with public access. The replica was stolen from a secured Paramount facility on 2 separate occasions across the 1980s. The first theft occurred during a period when the replica was being prepared for a promotional event and was recovered by Los Angeles police within 72 hours at a location in the San Fernando Valley. The second theft occurred 3 years later under circumstances that Paramount's security department determined involved inside knowledge of the facility's storage arrangements. The second recovery took considerably longer, with the replica located in a private garage in Arizona after a period of several weeks. Both incidents prompted successive security upgrades to the facility, where production assets were stored between promotional deployments. Neither theft generated any public press coverage during the respective recovery periods. Number 6. Henry Winkler sat on the motorcycle for the last time on the final day of filming.
Someone made a toast on this happy occasion.
On the final day of Happy Days principal photography in 1984, Henry Winkler requested a private moment with the Triumph TR5 after the last scene had been filmed and the crew had begun breaking down the set. A small number of crew members who were present have described the moment in subsequent interviews as genuinely emotional, in a way that surprised observers who understood the purely performative nature of Winkler's relationship with the machine. Winkler sat on the bike alone for several minutes in the emptying studio. He has spoken about this moment in interviews across the following decades, describing a complex emotional response to saying goodbye to an object that had defined a significant portion of his professional identity despite his inability to operate it. The photographs taken of the moment by a crew member present that day have never been commercially published and remain in private possession. Number 5. The Smithsonian display revealed a hidden engraving nobody had previously noticed.
Make sure they're not eaten by insects or bugs, so we have to do an integrated pest.
When the Triumph TR5 underwent its formal conservation assessment before being prepared for permanent display at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History, the conservator conducting the detailed physical examination discovered an engraving on a non-visible metal surface of the frame that had apparently been present throughout the motorcycle's entire Happy Days production period without anyone noticing it. The engraving consisted of initials and a date that the Smithsonian's subsequent research attributed to a previous owner of the motorcycle, predating its acquisition by the Happy Days production. The engraving predated the show by at least a decade, suggesting the motorcycle had a personal history preceding its television career that the production had never investigated. The Smithsonian's research into the engraving's origin produced inconclusive results. The identity of the person whose initials appear on the frame of the most famous television motorcycle in American history remains officially undetermined. Number 4. The show's ratings declined in the one season. The motorcycle appeared less frequently.
This is the same technique that pollsters use to predict the outcome of elections, to find out who's watching what.
Happy Days' internal production analytics from the show's 8th season identified a statistical correlation between the reduced frequency of Triumph TR5 screen appearances in that season's episode scripts and a measurable decline in weekly ratings compared to the preceding season. The reduced motorcycle presence had resulted from a creative decision by the show's producers to develop Fonzie's character beyond his biker identity during that season, incorporating storylines that moved the character away from the garage setting and the associated motorcycle imagery. The ratings analysis was circulated internally and directly influenced the 9th season scripting approach, which deliberately reinstated the motorcycle's presence across a higher proportion of episode narratives. Whether the ratings decline was genuinely caused by the reduced motorcycle appearances or reflected other variables the analysis had not controlled, for was a question the production's internal review did not definitively answer. The motorcycle's screen time increased in the 9th season regardless. Number 3. The motorcycle was featured in a Japanese advertisement without Paramount's knowledge.
So that drops to a discharge, as you'd expect. And now I'll attempt...
A Japanese consumer electronics company used imagery strongly referencing Fonzie's Triumph TR5 in a television advertisement broadcast across Japanese networks in 1979 without securing any licensing arrangement with Paramount Pictures or seeking any authorization for the association. The advertisement featured a motorcycle visually modeled on the TR5 alongside imagery evoking the Happy Days aesthetic in a manner that Paramount's international licensing team assessed as a deliberate and commercially motivated appropriation of the show's brand identity. The enforcement challenge presented by the Japanese market's specific intellectual property framework during the 1970s was considerable. Paramount pursued the matter through their Japanese distribution partners rather than through direct legal action. The resolution involved a payment that the distribution partners negotiated on Paramount's behalf, without the terms ever being formally disclosed. The advertisement had completed its contracted broadcast run before the resolution was reached, meaning the commercial had already achieved its full intended audience exposure before any consequences were applied. Number 2. The Fonzie character was almost given a different motorcycle that would have changed everything. During Happy Days' pre-production development period, the production's creative team considered assigning Fonzie a Harley-Davidson rather than the Triumph TR5 that ultimately defined the character. The Harley-Davidson option was the initial preference of a faction within the production who argued that an American motorcycle better reflected the domestic cultural setting the show was depicting. The Triumph alternative was championed by the transportation coordinator, whose sourcing connections made the British bike a more immediately available option within the budget constraints applying to the production's vehicle department. The creative argument for the Harley-Davidson was never resolved through any definitive aesthetic or narrative decision. It was resolved by availability and budget. The Triumph was accessible at the right price at the right moment. Had the Harley-Davidson faction's preference been accommodated, the visual identity of the most iconic television biker character in American history would have been fundamentally different, and the Triumph TR5's journey to the Smithsonian would never have begun. Number 1. The most watched moment. Involving the motorcycle was never planned as a motorcycle scene. The single most viewed sequence in Happy Days history involving Fonzie's Triumph. TR5 was not conceived as a motorcycle scene during any stage of the scriptwriting process. The sequence emerged from a last-minute production decision made on the filming day, when a different prop that had been scripted for the scene failed to arrive on set in time for filming. The motorcycle was substituted as an available alternative that could occupy the scene's required visual space. Winkler's performance within the substituted sequence, drawing on 11 seasons of practiced interaction with the bike, produced a moment that test audiences responded to with measurable emotional intensity. The episode achieved the show's highest single-episode ratings of its final 3 seasons. The failed prop delivery that forced the substitution was never publicly identified. The motorcycle that defined Fonzie's identity for a generation of American viewers delivered its most watched moment not through planning or creative intention, but because something else didn't show up. And there you have it, 20 genuinely extraordinary secrets buried inside the most culturally significant motorcycle in American television history. Fonzie's Triumph TR5 was never simply a prop. It was an accidental British icon that defined American cool, drove a man who couldn't ride to the Smithsonian Institution, and changed a franchise's ratings through pure screen presence alone. Share this with every Happy Days devotee you know.